Welcome to user training for the Cloud DPE Development Studio. In this session, we will be setting up a healthcare database that we will then use in other sessions to do some simple analyses. This data is publicly available on the CMS website. This is the address of that website in case anybody wants to pull this down on their own. If you go to the page for that address and scroll down, you will see two links for data for 2013 and 2012. Basically, this data is a summary of the amounts paid to Medicare Part B physicians and other suppliers, other providers, and it's broken down by the service rendered for those payments designated by what they call a HCPCS code. So it's about 9 million rows in each of these two tables. If I download the data and on my client, it looks like this. It's about 485 megabytes in size for 2013, expands to 2.15 gigabytes. For 2012, it's about 456 megabytes, expands to about 2.1 gigabytes. So this is the data we want to import into the DPE system. I have set up a template to bring that data in. But I want to show you how I constructed this template. And the way I did it, I'm just going to start off with a new import. Whoops. New import. I'll just call this CMS data. So we want to import this. We have to know some things about it in order to import it. It actually says on the website that it is tab delimited and carriage return line feed. But if we didn't know that, there's some easy ways to find out. There's a tool that I like to use, which is called vEdit. vEdit is a nice tool in a couple of ways. One is that you can read very large, unlimited, in fact, size files in, but it doesn't read them all at one time. It reads only one screen at a time. To give an example, I'm going to load in one of those tables that I just showed you, one of the files I just showed you. Load in the 2012 data, and you see it comes right up. Because it just loaded in the amount of data to fill the screen. Now, but then of course it'll load in more as is needed as you scroll down or whatever. So looking at this data, a couple of things we can notice. One is that it has column headings at the top. It also has a second line with copyright information, which we really don't want either. So we want to skip the first two lines when we import this data. It's fairly evident that it's tab delimited here, even though we knew that ahead of time. But vEdit also has a neat feature that if you didn't know that, it has a display mode toggle switch here. And I can toggle this to the fourth mode, which is called ASCII 4 down here, show all characters down here. And you can see now it's showing the actual characters. Here it says this is a tab. And if we go over to the end of the lines, we'll see it shows that these also are carriage return line feeds at the end. So that's one good way of, if you have data that you don't know what the column delimiters and row delimiters are, then you can easily use this tool to bring it in and inspect the data to find that out. So I'm going to close this. And we want to use the auto create template feature in order to build this template. And so I'm first of all, let me go up here. I'm going to skip 2 rows, and I'm going to bring up the dialog box for the auto create function. You can work from the server or the client. I'm going to work from the client. And here I've got the 2012 data, so I'll bring in the 2012 data. I'm going to, instead of evaluating all rows, I'm just going to do about 1 million rows. Okay, and first row contains column names. So this now will analyze this table to build the template automatically. Up here you can see it analyzing it's up to 309,000 already. And this, by the way, this is working strictly on my client, it's not using the server. So that's why it's a little bit slow. As you noted, that my client is an i5 Intel i5, so it's limited by the speed of that processor. And here is the template that we just created. This template, the other thing that I wanted to point out is that this works great. It's a fairly robust feature, except when the number of columns in the first row is less than the columns in subsequent rows. So, for example, in this case, if you had a number of column names that were less than the number of columns in subsequent rows, then it would cause an error condition. But otherwise, it's a fairly robust feature. It does some automatic naming, creates names automatically, and so it's pretty good in handling different situations. It can also, if you don't have column names at the first row, then it will just say column 1, column 2, column 3, and so on. Okay, so now we have this. We've analyzed the first million rows here. A couple of things you might notice here. The NPI, which I happen to know is a 10-character numeric ID field. It's right now an integer, brought as an integer because there were no alpha in the column. You'll see down here where there are alpha in the alphanumeric fields. It then will analyze to tell you what the length is that you need to bring that data in order to avoid losing any data. But here he brought this as an integer because he didn't find the alphanumeric information. I'd like to keep that as a varchar instead of. I like ID fields that you don't add, subtract, or multiply. I like to keep those as varchar as well. So I happen to know that this is 10 characters long, and I can make this 10 characters. But let's see, I didn't know that. And also down here with the zip code the zip code came in as varchar 9, so that works out well. But there any other fields that you want to change to from numeric to string, you need to know how long. Now there's a feature in this template builder that allows you to do something in that order. And I'm going to create another template just to show you that feature. I'm going to create another import. I'm just going to call it my import here. And again, skip 2 rows, carriage return, line feed, tabs. And over here, I'm going to bring in the same data. But this time I'm going to say make all columns varchar. So in this way, it will it's going to evaluate also the first million records, first million lines. And this way, it's going to tell me for those for all of the fields, regardless of whether they're numeric or alpha, it will tell me how long a field I need to bring in as a string. And this can be very helpful. So here it does confirm that the NPI is indeed 10 characters long. And of course, any other fields that I want to bring in, it would tell me how long that I want to change from numeric to string. It tells me what the required length of that string field would be. So I'm going to go, but I don't need this. I was just showing you how that works. Then you, of course, use this information in order to modify. Of course, you don't want to bring in the allowed amounts, these kind of numeric fields down here as string, even though it's telling you how much room you'd need. So I'm going to delete this now and go back to my previous template. I've changed the NPI to 10. I also, down at the bottom, want to change these floats to doubles. The reason is that the double retains more characters, of course, more significant digits. And sometimes when you perform subtotals and you do operations, you need to retain more significant digits. You need to start out with more significant digits and keep them in the calculations. And so you want these to be doubles. Now, actually the auto create function, the auto create template function, has a feature in there that, let me say no here. I'm going to just start again and new import. And if I went to the auto create function, you'll see down here there's something called promote float to double. So if I brought my table in, and now I could say it to, if I don't want to make all columns varchar, then I can say promote float to double. And that automatically would give us doubles in place of the floats. So then you wouldn't have to go back and change them like I just did individually. Okay, so what I did was I used this function, this auto create function, to analyze both the 2012 and the 2013 data. Let me just get rid of this. The 2012 and the 2013 data. I looked at each column to make sure that I constructed the template that I constructed to handle both tables had large enough, long enough strings to accommodate the links in both tables. So I basically did this twice, but also analyzed all the lines in each file. It takes a few minutes, but not too long. And again, remember, it's using the client. It doesn't use the server at all. And then I constructed, based on the information from those two templates, I constructed one template to bring in both tables. Okay, as you can see in my Tables Explorer, I have a database just called Healthcare, and that's where I want to put the imported table. So I'm going to run this now and insert an address, a table name, which is healthcare, and then physician HCPCS _ 2012. HCPCS, by the way, is just the name of some of the procedure codes that is used in the table. And in an open table after import, I'm not going to append, but I'm going to do this from the server because I imported the same data, the data I just showed you on the client. I also uploaded to the server. So if we say OK and we go over to the file picker on the server and go to the healthcare database that I have here, you will see down here there is, in fact, the 2012 data and the 2013 data. So I'm bringing the 2012 data now, again about 2.1 gigabytes of data, and it's going to bring that in. This is about 9 million records. As you can see, it moves pretty fast, much faster than from the client. This is the data, 9.153 million records are in the 2012 data. Okay, so this is now over here. If I look at the healthcare, I refresh this, we'll see that data, and it only it compressed about 55%. It's not really a heavy compression rate for this type of data. Okay, now I'm going to let's see, that's 1.3 gigabytes. That's why I say that compared to the 2.2 or so that we brought in. Okay, I want to now also bring in the 2013 data. So I'm going to run my template again and bring in, and this time I'm going to do something. Let me cancel this for a second. I want to change this to a 1. I'm going to purposely make a mistake. So I'm going to bring in the 2013 data and bring in that line with the copyright, just to show you how I can correct that in another step. So I'm going to run the template here, change this now to a 3, and go over to here and find the 2013 data. As you can see, it's about 2.2 gigabytes. Bring that in, and at that point we will have both 2012 and 2013 data in the same directory. So over here, if I refresh this, you can see the 2012 and 2013 data that we just imported. Okay, so now I want to build a seed to combine these two tables into one. So I'm going to go up here and start a new seed, and we'll just call this CMS combine. Go to my Tables Explorer. I can bring in the 2012 data and add all columns. I can then go back and bring in the 2013 data, add all columns. You'll notice that the from changes to an asterisk, showing that the column comes in from both tables using the same name. I want to come down here and add a a small integer, which I'm going to call year, and basically I just want to add the year in there. So we'll put a formula that says if file equal 1, then 2012, else 2013. Okay, so this will combine the two tables into one. Now, I mentioned before I purposely made a mistake in the 2013 data. I actually brought in that extra line at the very beginning. Now, there's two ways of handling that. I can either go to the range, the input range dialog here, and I can tell it to start with the second line instead of the first line, and then I know there's less than 10 million, so I'll put in 10 million records, and that will then skip that line. The other alternative is that if we inspect the data, we can tell that that line starts with a 0 and all the other ones start with a 1. So I could also just put a simple filter in there that says that the NPI did not begin with 0, and that's another way of excluding that line. So now I want to put out an output table. I'm going to have to rename this. I'm going to pretend to rename it, but I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to add output, and here I want to call this 2 years. Yeah. Okay, and then just for fun, I'm going to sort this by the NPI number, by the NPI ID, and just run this. So it's going to bring in all 9 million records from both tables. It's going to sort them by the NPI and output a table with something over 18 million records sorted by NPI. And now we'll have both years in one table. So it's doing that, and now you can see that it's finished the input. It's now on the output, and take a few seconds to do that. And we will be done. And at this point, we will stop here and continue on in future sessions to show how to take this data, do a little data mining, and set up some reference files for procedure code and provider code, provider ID, and for the actual utilization by procedure code by the providers. So here is the 18.4 million records we just created by combining those two tables. Okay, we'll stop here and we'll pick up in the next session.